everybody, and welcome to 2021. This is Food and Beverage Magazine Live. I almost don't know where to start. On a day like today, where do you go? I'm reminded of the quote that Winston Churchill gave us when he said that in success you deserve it, and in defeat you need it. He could very easily have been talking about coffee. He was, of course, talking about champagne, but I'm reminded of the fact that it applies perhaps even more so to coffee, as in this moment in time when we're all just trying to wake up in rather disbelief about everything that's going on in our world amidst the pandemics and the politics and everything else. How can we focus on the things that matter most? Of course, we've all learned, and most of us already knew, that what really matters most is people, not things, and moments, and judging is really left best out of the equation. For those of us that are lucky enough to be considered foodies, maybe we're self-identified as foodies. For those of us who've enjoyed having a robust life of adventure and tasting and going to restaurants and the conviviality and hospitality that those places have brought to our lives, when we talk about what's become essential, and we know that people, not things, are essential, we also know that in the realm of commerce, our restaurants are essential. Forgive me while I mention that one of the most important things that this moment in time has taught us is just how essential our restaurants are. Let's consider that they're the essential part of our world, that in the last recession, big banks went to the government and said, we are too big to fail. I'm going to argue in this crisis, restaurants and the hospitality industry, which have been so unfairly, I'm going to add, hit hard, that our industry, the hospitality industry, is too important, too essential to fail. And so for those of us who are missing our favorite place where we are a regular, where they know us by name, we're hoping that in 2021, all of the creative men and women of our industry are going to find a way to adapt and to bring their genius to a new endeavor. And if the world can be summed up by saying you have food that comes from a farm and it travels to your fork, that unless you're growing your food yourself, which is a whole nother show, it's going to go from the farm to the fork, and all the people that touch it on that path add something valuable to it to make it irresistible and delicious and nutritious for us. All the people in the millions of restaurants that have closed permanently are going to need to take that passion that they have and their talent in the hospitality industry and find a new way to play a role in the path from the farm to the fork. One of the things we are committed to doing is finding entrepreneurs in the food world who are doing things that will be inspiring to the entirety of that population of people who love food and wine and food and drink, but maybe displaced as well. And I'm very proud to say that our guests today are just those kinds of entrepreneurs. If you ever heard the expression, when you get up in the morning, you're going to go have a cup of gumption, meaning the coffee is so delicious and so enlivening that first sip of the day is going to give you enough gumption to go out and tackle the world. Well, when you have got to find a new way, a new silver lining to be in the industry you've been in for 1, 10, 20 years, because the industry changed, you're going to need a really delicious, strong cup of gumption. And that's what we've got today. The good folks from Gumption Coffee, a brand new company, are joining us today, led by an extraordinary group of women, helmed by the one and only Hazel de los Reyes, who is going to be joining us now from her roastery and cuppery. We're going to do a cupping today. We're going to do a tasting today, and we're going to use our neat tasting glass, which is designed to augment and accentuate the beautiful flavors. We're going to celebrate the aromas and the tastes of her Gumption Coffee, and we're very glad to welcome her to the show. Hazel, welcome. Bienvenidos. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much, Jennifer. How are you?
I'm extraordinarily well, but I'm really privileged to be here doing this show and welcoming you as our first guest of 2021, because I could think of no better thing that you wake up on New Year's Day and do you really want another glass of champagne or do you need a good strong cup of coffee? So it's fitting that our first guest of the year is that good, delicious, strong cup of coffee. And I have a proper cup as well. But I wanted to welcome you properly to the show and tell you what a privilege it is. And I wanted to ask you about your entrepreneurial path that has led you to be in this very distinctive category. You're going to be our expert in the business, our friend in the business. You're in a very particular place. And you'd think with a Starbucks on every corner that the coffee category was already handled.
Yeah.
I want to know, what is the category you consider your business in?
Okay. Well, we came here to New York because New Yorkers love their coffee as much as Sydney-siders do. They'll go to a cafe in the morning, preferably before work, and then perhaps sometime in the morning, and then in the afternoon after lunch, and maybe another one just before going home. And that's something that Sydney-siders do a lot. And I thought of a place where the people just need, a cup of gumption, just transition them from one part of the day to another. And New York came up. And in terms of where we fit in, well, I've been in this industry for 17 years. And in Sydney, it's specialty coffee, sort of like the top end where, we have bought green coffee at auctions before. This is, a picture of green coffee. And, sold it at a very expensive price and pretty much attracted the coffee snobs. And the specialty coffee people. And we're still doing that in Sydney. And there's a lot of them there. But I'm just thinking, where does the everyday person go to get their coffee? And as you mentioned, the particular brand that everyone goes to, and something that apparently America runs on.
Now, by the way, I'm a native Bostonian, and we were the only people to have donkeys for a long time, and we feel very much a part of that culture. So while it was not something that everybody grew up with, I remember it from the old days when it really was just and it was a coffee that was designed to wear cream and sugar.
Yes.
And as a black coffee lover, it was never my thing. Mm-hmm. But I have to respect it because it's as much a part of my culture as the Red Sox.
Yes, and that's the thing as well. So a lot of people go to, the very popular places and then add a whole lot of cream and sugar to make it palatable. But then I think, if they had coffee that they didn't have to pile on a whole lot of cream and sugar onto, that tasted good enough in itself, because I too am a black coffee drinker. I like my drip coffee, and you know what? That's what attracted me to New York. Because in Australia, it's 99% espresso. So if Americans go to a cafe and you go, "Can I get a coffee?" And they'll go, "Okay, would you like a latte, a cappuccino, a flat white?" And then you go, no, just a coffee. And then by that stage, they would have noticed your American accent and go, "Oh, Americano." And yeah, but that way of making coffee really is predominantly milk. A latte would have an ounce of espresso, the rest is steamed milk. So is a flat white, so is a cappuccino. Again, it doesn't really herald the coffee in its pure form, whereas drip does.
Yeah.
And this is where I think gumption can come in. If with the things that's happened in 2020, thankfully we can see the back of that. It has, I think, for want of a better word, imprisoned people in their homes, and people have had to make do with making a whole lot of things. and making their own coffee. They can't get a latte at home unless they invest in an expensive espresso machine. So more or less people will be drinking drip. And it's been my mission ever since I stepped in onto New York grounds that I will make the most delicious drip coffee ever that New Yorkers will find good enough that when they take the first sip in the morning and it's every bit as warm, filling, rich, full of coffee flavors and some notes of chocolate, caramel, the natural flavors of coffee that they sip. And then it gives them the natural stimulant property of coffee. Then it's like a bling. A light bulb goes into their head, goes on in their head, and suddenly the whole world wakes up and it becomes a whole day of possibilities because you've had that.
I love that idea. I love that idea.
Yes. So, and that's what I'm, hoping to bring, especially for 2021. I do believe, as I mentioned to another person before, that coffee, if it is done well and it tastes every bit as good as you expect it to, can change your mind, can change a mindset from, imagine if you're so groggy in the morning, or if you've got a headache, or you've got like a problem to solve, you get your cup of coffee and it suddenly stops you on your track. You think about things and go, hey, this is delicious. And then you keep drinking, and then, your brain's starting to, start moving and thinking about things. So it gets you on your way to doing possibly great things. And I do believe coffee is an agent for agency. It's a vehicle for agency. It makes you decide on things, do something, get going, and that's nothing can, not a better word can encapsulate what coffee does other than gumption, I think, and that's why I picked that name.
I love that. You and partner Claire Lim have an extraordinary mission that you've brought to life in Midtown Manhattan. Let me ask you to take a step back as my expert in the coffee business. Coffee is essential, I believe. And I don't know whether my first cup of the day is the most important. Sometimes my 4 o'clock in the afternoon cup is even more important than my morning cup. But I drink coffee black. And I want to talk about what coffee actually is, because I think of coffee as a different product than all the variations once you start adding milk and sugar to it. To me, it's as essential as wine, in the sense that you have an organic agricultural product that you process a certain way, in a style, in a certain way, that you manufacture and love into existence, and then it gets into the hands of people who do something more with it. They will brew it in their home, and there's wild variations that can happen based on the type of machinery with which a coffee is made, and the water, something as simple as the water. So I wanted to reach out to you today and ask you, before we even get into the roastery and how your different grinds and different blends and different roasts all coax very different life out of those beans, I wanted to take you and have you help me understand something I already know a little bit about, which is wine. And when you show me those green berries, those green coffee beans, before you roast them, I'm reminded of grapes, where the terroir of where they come from matters and certainly has a role in how it ultimately is done. But you are like the coffee winemaker. You have all of these tools and techniques in your arsenal with which to make this very distinctive house style that will be enjoyable in a very nowhere to hide kind of way. That once you sip a black coffee, it tells you everything about what it is. So
Yes.
can we go and have you teach us, when I take a sip of black coffee, what is it telling us about what it is, and what should a good black coffee be?
Okay, so let's go have a sip of our coffee.
And I just want you to know that I actually put mine in my neat tasting glass, a glass that is designed to augment the aromas and the tasting properties. So we're going to do
Oh.
professional, and it's our version of cupping.
So you take a sip of the coffee. You
It's so
hold it
delicious,
in.
by the way. I love your roast.
Oh, thank you. So you hold it in your mouth and you swirl your tongue, and that is what you get for a body, for a mouthfeel. You know, coffee, like wine, can be medium, can be heavy bodied. How does it weigh in your mouth? And this is when, as you're perceiving, you're also setting preferences. Are you a heavy coffee? Do you like heavy bodied coffee? Do you like heavy bodied wine? Or do you like light bodied wine, but kind of supple and silky in the mouthfeel? So when you swirl that coffee around, it's very much similar to wine. How does it feel? How does it cling to
To
your
me,
mouth?
I'll tell you, I use a Keurig 1 cup at a time, but I have a disposable, like not a disposable. I use
Adapter.
I fill it with my own grind every time.
Yes.
And
Excellent.
I find that I use distilled water, and I'm kind of a bit of a coffee snob. So I actually buy jugs of what's called nursery water, which is what you'd make your baby food with, or baby food, right? So it's about the best distilled water I can find. And it's a really clean water, and it makes a really clean cup. And so for me, your coffee, when I brew it, has a very satiny kind of
Ooh,
lusciousness to it. It's very satiny and good, which
that's nice.
when I'm waking up in the morning, I'm happy to have. It's not thick like velvet, and it's not thin like silk. It's
Yes.
satiny. It's like right nicely between the two.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's great. That's, that's the first time I've, heard that impression of the mouthfeel of coffee, which is, wow, that's impressive. And yeah, so there's a mouthfeel, but at the same time, as you're holding it in your mouth, you're also breathing in through your back passages. So then you can have a sniff through the, retronasal passages, and the aroma, the flavor of the coffee. So what are you getting from here?
And that's where I get all those lovely chocolate notes. And you might think, well, you don't know, it's not chocolate, it's coffee. But
Yes.
when you take a sip of wine and you're like, oh, well, that's a lovely wine. And there are certain elements that are discovered in a tasting kit called Linné du Vin. Has anyone ever done a Linné du Coffee?
Yes,
Or I guess
they
it'd be a
have.
Linné du Café.
Yes, they have a Linné du Café, which is a 32 bottle set. I do have the Linné du Vin, which is that one that comes in a red box, fold-out box, that has 54 bottles. And I actually use it for my sensory class. Because
and we should tell people that haven't had the chance to try it, what it does is it encapsulates the essential aroma, one of the essential aromas that would be found in any of the different kinds of wine that you might experience. So when someone says chocolate or leather or strawberries or stone fruits or cherry fruits or whatever it is, figs, you come back to that common point of reference, because in order for you and I to share the experience, we have to have the common language with which to be united by it.
And yes, and it's also scientifically backed. It's not just a bunch of wine snobs or coffee snobs saying, oh, I can taste peach or cherries. Coffee has around about, I don't know, we can start at 700 chemical compounds. A lot of them are odorants. And you can trace those odorants to a particular scent. So you can produce in all of the, chemical compounds that you initiate during a roasting process, odorants that are very, that are the markers for cherries, the markers for apricots, for chocolates. And, those are replicated in things like the Linné du Vin series and the Linné du Café. And you can taste them in wine as well, because wine, and just as coffee is a complex beverage that must contain thousands of odorants and flavorants that you can, derive out of them. That's what makes them so delicious.
So when we're talking about what we're sipping now, what did you brew today? And can you show the packages? Because I'm a little embarrassed that there's scant product left in the bags you sent me. They're kind of like all crapped up because they're almost empty. So I had wrinkled them. So let's show everybody what we're drinking.
So today we're drinking greatness. And you know what? It's called Go With Greatness. It's, I think, my street fighting blend. This is the one that I am very proud of because it's, for me, what New York is essentially in a cup. And New York is a great city. And I think New Yorkers are great people. And 2021 will be a great year for them. So I do recommend Go With Greatness. So that's what we're drinking.
And we've got gumptioncoffee.com's website, and I can order this. I don't need to travel to New York to get a cup of your coffee. I can order it. You ship all over the country.
Yes,
and if people want to know why we think this is such a special product, it's because not only is it remarkably well roasted and the flavors are fantastic and the story is amazing, and I became fans of yours the second I read about what you guys are doing, but more importantly, I think that the trending is important to talk about, which is that we've got craft beer happening all over the country. There are industries that historically were controlled by the practically monolithic players in the industry that defined what it was. And in, let's say, the beer world, we had our Anheuser-Busch's, and now we have fantastic craft beer and craft brewing in cities all over the country, and microbrews and micro distilling. And we're really coming back to the craft of making these things. And for the last 12 or 15 years, we've had that same kind of craft or micro roasting and creating going on. And I think you've done as extraordinary a job as anybody in the country. And I'm really grateful that you take the time to come and be with us. Let's talk a little bit about what this kind of what I'll call boutique or specialty roasting business is about. Give us a bit of a primer and what goes into it. And like craft beers, why the distinctiveness and the individuality of your house style matters so much.
Okay. Well, as you said before, farm to plate. We call it crop to cup. Yeah. With specialty coffee, it's about traceability and seasonality. We come to realize that coffee has, a harvest cycle. It's a bit like a human being. It takes 9 months from a flower to seed and into ripe cherry, 9 months to grow. And different countries between the Tropic of Capricorn and Cancer, so it's, the tropical belt, can grow coffee, and
it's where the spices of the world come from also
exactly. And obviously it favors higher altitude, so you can, most coffees are sourced from how high mountain sierras and mountain ranges, because that's where they thrive, and the altitude gives them the distinctive flavor that they have. And so,
and on the greatness, just to interrupt you, I apologize. Where is the greatness origin from?
It is a blend, and this is the many years of 17 years of my roasting experience, creating, blends, and blend is a creation of the roaster, and greatness is the name. And it comes from I'm very proud to say, one of the beans that go into greatness, and I'll show you, this is the green beans from a new cooperative that we've come across from the Mixteca mountain range in Oaxaca, a bit north of Oaxaca, Mexico. And this is produced by 700 small scale farmers in that region. And they named this coffee that they produce El Nido de Águila, which is the nest of the eagle's nest. And they're very proud, and they have their own traditions and own culture, very proud people. And I'm very glad to be using this coffee from that cooperative in Greatness. And the other coffee that I use is also from another cooperative of small-scale farmers. In Colombia, most farmers own on average 3 hectares of land that they grow coffee. That's very small. And most of it is family run. You know, the kids pick the cherries, and you know, relatives pick the cherries, and it, you know, it gets dried out on patio, sometimes in the ceiling. And the coffee that we get from Colombia is from the El Cabradon Growers Association in Palestina, Huila. And I've visited that region, and I've visited the Farmers Association, and I met some of the farmers that produce the coffee for El Cabradon. And you know, their terrain is very hilly, and when it rains, it's very slippery. And when they harvest beans, they have to carry these big sacks down the muddy terrain. And I don't know how they do it, because I can't even, you know, traverse those terrains myself without anything on me. And so those are the 2 great coffees, and we also use Java in there. And one other coffee that I'm very proud that's part of the Greatness Blend is from David Mamani in Carnavi, Bolivia.
Oh, cool.
His is such a small farm. It's just 1 hectare, and we cupped it, you know, blind. So, you know, we can truly focus on the flavor and the quality of the coffee. And it just leapt out of the cupping table and go, oh, this is so good. I want to get this coffee. And I learned that, you know, I got introduced to David Mamani, and I bought out his entire crop that year, and he's very happy, and I'm very happy, and I'm hoping to, in the future, continue working with him. But you know, people have gotten knowledgeable of his coffee and starting to, you know, make inquiries. But you know what? If the vid benefits from it, all the more. And I'm glad and happy to have introduced his coffee to the world.
I am so grateful to have this time with you. You're incredibly generous.
Oh, thank you.
To spend this time and to teach us. It makes perfect sense that in this blend that we're sipping, that I had the thoughts that I was having that led to the question that I want to talk about next, which is really not so much as a question as a topic. I love pairing food and drink of all sorts. But coffee is a very special thing, especially if you like it strong and black like I enjoy it. It has bitter notes, it has chocolate notes, it has the acid notes. It's got all the things that we love about it, that it does all the things for us that we love it doing. But then we talk about the pairing. One of my all-time favorite pairings is a peanut butter cookie and a cup of hot black coffee.
Yes.
When you tell me, when I was thinking about this today, when I was saying, you know what else I'd like to pair with this? Because I'm speaking to you from Tucson, Arizona, which is just up the road from Oaxaca. Well, maybe a little bit more than a very long road, but the food of the states of Mexico, from Sinaloa, which is really right across the border, all the way down to Oaxaca, give us these cuisine elements that make me crave. And I was having a craving for a taco that's called birria, which is this slow roasted spice
soup. Yes.
And it comes with its own broth, but it has these beautiful spice notes. And it made me realize that I could serve this coffee at dinner with birria, and it would be a really beautiful sipping companion to that meal.
Yes.
And of course, when I think of things like the moles that this region is known for, it's the other flavor I was thinking of, the chicken mole from Carlotta Flores. Chef Carlotta Flores makes a chicken mole at her El Charro restaurant. And El Charro is celebrating 99 years of existence. And of course, Johnny Apple, the late, great food editor from the New York Times, loved El Charro, and Gourmet magazine named it one of the 21 most essential restaurants in the country because of what it is. But they make this amazing mole that was the other flavor I craved when I was sipping the coffee. And it made me think about pairing and food and coffee. We kind of do it without thinking about it. We have whatever we eat for breakfast with our coffee. But what can you tell us about pairing coffee and cuisine to enhance the expressions that you've roasted and blended into the mix that you've created?
There's a whole new world of possibilities for that. So you mainly, pair it with breakfast. But I must say, this coffee will go well with huevos rancheros. Because I've had, breakfast, savory breakfast with a whole lot of chili and a whole lot of, spice to it. And actually, when I taste this greatness with it, sometimes it can accentuate the smoky flavors of the coffee. Sometimes it makes you appreciate the depth of the flavor of the food more. And it's the second case where it really opened up the spices and the creaminess of the egg, and the coffee didn't suffer for it. So there is that immense possibility with pairing. And for dinner, for lunch or dinner, then it's not just hot coffee. You can also get cold brews, cold drips. So like for something that you like as a salve for something spicy and hot, maybe you can have an icy cold brew.
And by the way, I need to chime in and say the one that we're sipping, which is so remarkably delicious, I'm drinking at room temperature, and it's really released all the aromatics. And the thing, if you really want to get to know a coffee, is it as delicious or even more delicious when it's room temperature or cold as when it's piping hot, when it's hiding behind the trick of piping hot pleasure, when it really has to reveal itself in all of the ways that it does. I mean, I have to compliment you. This is really delicious.
Thank you. And they do say that a marker for really great coffee is that how it tastes cold. If it tastes, delicious cold, then that's really great coffee. And when we cup in the industry, we use our spoon and we slurp while it's hot, but we also wait until the coffee's cooled down a bit, because you're right. The aromatics are released and you have a better sense of the acidity of the coffee and the flavor of the coffee that's coming through. And sometimes for me to decide on a cupping table which lot to buy, I really wait until it's room temperature cold. And if it wowed me again at that temperature as it did when it's hot, then by God, I'm going to put my money onto it.
So can I just tell you, as the audience knows, once I fall in love with something, I will tend to gush about it, maybe to the point of unprofessionalism. But you can't imagine how many lousy cups of coffee I had to have before I discovered something I can really be enthusiastic about. I want you to know how deeply affected I was by not only the story, but the quality of the roast and the connoisseurship that it triggered in me to pay attention to these kinds of things freshly and anew. And I want everybody to enrich their experience, but I also want people to imagine, where could they take their passion for coffee in their own communities to become the conduit for someone to discover from the carafe, from the cup, from the actual source at Gumption Coffee. I want kids in the industry to be inspired. And I want to thank you for coming today to give us this really robust cupload of inspiration.
Thank you. And as they say, coffee is meant to be shared. So if you want to bring your passion for coffee to your communities, get a packet of coffee and a French press and share it amongst people you care about and people you want to, be inspired by the world with.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, is there a machine that you think optimizes the house style of Gumption Coffee? Is it a French press? Is it a drip? Is it an espresso machine? I realize my beautiful Keurig is like a lazy man's French press, but what do you think is the best machine to optimize the house style of Gumption Coffee?
You know what? Because I do want to reach out as many people as I can with Gumption Coffee. I tried to, at home, I have a basic drip machine. That big brand that ships you everything. They've got a range called Basics. I got that in a drip, and I thought, if I can make my coffee from there and it tastes delicious, then this is how everyone will be tasting it at home. So you don't really need a fancy machine. You don't need an espresso machine. Well, only if you like your lattes and you can steam your own milk and you like that practice, then by all means, go get an espresso machine. But to get great coffee at home, all you have to do is a drip machine or even just a French press. And I have been tailoring this blend, and it's kind of like a never-ending work in progress to taste 1,000% delicious to the lowest technology possible. So, and that's been my mission.
Hazel de los Reyes, I'm someone who loves words, as you've probably discovered, but I also love coffee, and I want to thank you for this. I'm someone who embraces the tradition of toasting when I'm sharing a moment of conviviality and hospitality with a new friend. And I'm really curious, is there a tradition of toasting in the coffee world?
No, we should start it,
Let's start one.
Cheers.
We're going to come up with a house toast for Gumption Coffee.
Yes, we will. Say Gumption.
And on our next visit, we shall share that with everybody. But I'm reminded of Julia Child's toast that she shared with guests in her home with her husband, Paul. They would clink their glasses together, and it would make the beautiful sound that crystal makes.
Yes.
And she would say, Le carillon de l'amitié, to the bells of friendship.
Yes. To you.
Hazel de los Reyes and the Gumption Coffee Company can be found on the World Wide Web at gumptioncoffee.com. Their blends are numerous and delicious. Think of the adventure you will have, even if you're stuck at home at the moment, as you taste through the line and discover which blend was made just for you. I can't thank you enough for giving us our coffee primer and our first cup of the year. I'm really honored that it was you and that you came to visit with us. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. I'm glad to be here with you.
That wraps up our first show of the new year, 2021. Please stay safe and well. And remember that everything that we talk about on this program can be found in the pages of Food and Beverage Magazine, the industry publication for the boys and girls in the hospitality industry who are under tremendous duress. Let's all gather together and go out where you can. Tip big. And remember how many of our brothers and sisters in this industry are struggling right now. And if you can help them out by doing takeout wherever you live, or ordering from small companies that are emerging from this as an adaptation or side hustle from somebody who used to work at a bar or a restaurant that was one of your favorites. Ask around, go on Facebook, see what people are doing, and support the food entrepreneurs in your community. You will be richly, richly rewarded by what comes on your plate, on your fork, and in your cup. Buy local, shop local, taste local, and come back again very soon, where we have more food entrepreneurs and food and beverage stories of the trade right here on Food and Beverage Magazine Live.
Whether you are thinking about becoming a restaurateur or you are already in the business, Michael Politz has written a must-read, The Food and Beverage Magazine's Guide to Restaurant Success. Pick up your copy today at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Books A Million, or wherever fine books are sold.